It is Monday, February 15th, 2021, and this is the iPhoneography Podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg McMillan. Welcome to the show. It's going to be a good conversation tonight. Not only do I have my co-host, Dave Podner, with me. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Greg. Oh, yeah, always here.
Yeah.
Haven't left a seat in 2 weeks.
Yes, I know. I hear you. Same here. Yeah, because I've been just anticipating this one. But also tonight we have with us some Tiny Shutter alumni. We got Marc Sadowski and Matt Hoffman. Hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Really good. How about you, Matt?
Man, what's that smell? Sounds like somebody's been sitting here for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but up here in Ontario, we've been in another lockdown, and it finally opens up again a little bit tomorrow. So it'll be good to see a little bit of normalcy come back. But anyway, for tonight's show, I got the idea for this episode from a story by a fella named Raymond Wong, and he works at Input Magazine, inputmag.com. And I saw one of his tweets about this story, and this story intrigued me because, well, you'll find out why here. But I really wanted to do this show about it and do a discussion. So there will be a link to the article in the show notes, and I'm going to start by just going through some bullet points from the story because it's a fairly lengthy article. So just bear with me for a minute, guys, and then we'll get into it here. So, okay, so Raymond's article is about a shot of the moon taken with the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra and its space zoom feature. Now, before you panic, don't worry, this isn't all about the Samsung and Android and stuff, but that's where this kind of stems from. So there was people who thought that the S21 Ultra used an overlay of textures of the moon to give it all this detail that it has in the shot. Raymond tried to emulate the effect on a piece of garlic with the phone zoomed at 100x, which is the space zoom. And he wanted to see if it would trick the phone if the phone wasn't buying it. He tried a ping pong ball on a plain black background, and it didn't work. And he even tried illuminating the ball to make it look like it was the bright moon. Still nothing. So he went so far as to compare shots taken with the S21 Ultra and a Sony AR7 III with a 600 millimeter lens, actual shots of the moon in both cases here. And oddly enough, the phone showed better, crisper detail of the moon. So he was trying to debug whether, the phone was doing this properly or using an overlay, a fake overlay. So at one point in the article, he kind of alludes to the fact that maybe the phone knows that the device is pointing at the moon using GPS and, directional stuff and all that stuff. And maybe the focus was at infinity. So he puts in the article about some of the stuff that Samsung says about the phone. He says it uses AI in scene mode, which picks up about 30 different things to determine that it is the moon and then dials the exposure back to make the moon look good. So, I mean, anybody that's ever tried to take a picture of the moon, whether with a smartphone or a traditional camera, you got to kind of dial that exposure back a bit, dial it down a bit, underexpose or whatever you have, whatever you want to call it, to get the exposure right on the moon. And that's what the S21 Ultra seems to do. So what it does is it uses up to 20 frames captured instantaneously. And I quote, evaluates and corrects thousands of fine details to produce detailed images even at high magnification levels, unquote. So there's a video on the article about the camera system, and it's a really, really good video. I highly recommend anybody watching it, whether you're an iPhone fan or a smartphone fan or whatever, it doesn't matter, because it's a very informative video. And in all honesty, it might give Apple something to think about with some of the stuff they're doing. But anyway, so with all that being said, I will say that some of the technologies are similar, when it comes to the iPhone as well, multiple frames, blah, 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 all that stuff. So the topic of our discussion tonight is
wait a minute. Before you go into the topics, what was the final conclusion? That this was just the final conclusion was that this was just AI helping the photo, but it's essentially doing what night mode does on the iPhone, correct?
Kinda, yeah. The
computational photography.
Yes, yeah. And so ultimately, the final conclusion was that it wasn't fake. It was doing exactly what they said. It was using a number of frames, up to 20 frames, and it evaluated, and with AI, it would evaluate and correct thousands of fine details in the image to produce. And it works. And the space zoom. This isn't just with the moon. This is with anything taken with that space zoom camera. It makes all the corrections and everything else in different parts of the image that need it, and puts it all together for a final frame, which is really not unlike the iPhone. So that's kind of what the conclusion was, is that it's not fake. It's actually all computational. So that brings me to the topic, which is ethics in computational photography, because if you were trying to do a piece for like a news source, would that be considered an ethical means of capturing an image? So let's all chime in on our thoughts on that. So basically the discussion's not going to necessarily be about the S21 Ultra, although we can mention it. But I mean, it goes the same with iPhones, Huawei, any smartphone with a pretty good camera is probably going to be doing the same thing. And I can tell you this, that DSLRs do some sort of computational stuff as well. I mean, not just to produce a JPEG, but even in RAW, I would think. And I can touch on that if you want, but I wrote a blog post and I quoted that friend of mine, Don Komarechka, who had a real lengthy white paper from Canon that described how. Okay, so the long and short of this is, I might as well get it out now. The long and short of it is if you point the camera at a blank white wall, focus at infinity, I think it was, and set your exposure or whatever, and then take the shot and then unlock the lens and turn it so that the contacts dislodge, but leave the lens on.
You'll see Jesus.
Well, what it does is it changes the exposure of the camera. So the camera is actually, and I think it stops it down. So when you put the lens on, the camera is actually computationally doing something. So I'll
that's
link,
a lot of effort for something.
Yeah, I know. But I'll link to that in the show notes as well. I put a post on my blog about computational photography, and then I added the conversation he had on his podcast. I added it all verbatim so you can get an idea of what I was talking about there. But so ethics in computational photography. Who wants to go?
I'll let you guys take a stab at it first, but just to kind of give you all a background. I used to be a journalist back in the 90s. I used to I come from a photojournalistic background. I come from a writing background that taught me photojournalism, and then have been in photography ever since. So the odd thing is that my background, there have been shady things as far as like photojournalism. So I'm not exactly, well, we'll get into it, but I wanted to hear everybody else's thoughts first.
Okay, Matt or Dave, do you want to?
Well, I'll start off. I mean, It depends. It depends on what you're using the photo for. I mean, let's say you are right now just taking but if you're just taking a photo of, let's say using the Samsung here for an example, because I think we all agree that there's a good chance, well, maybe we don't agree, but I think there's a good chance that Apple's going to have their own, if they're not, but maybe not as super boosted as Samsung's in the future, where I think already they do things where it's like, oh, this is sky, so we're going to adjust this way, and this is this, and this is this. It's just not super zoom, but you're going to take one of the things they mentioned in articles, they can say like cat, dog, face, night scenes, indoor scenes, things like that. And you may be getting better than what the physics, the mechanical physics say that you can get out of a particular lens and everything else because of the computational part. But unless you're doing it to trick someone into something, if you're using it sheerly to take a better photo of something, now admittedly, like I said, there's a difference when you get into journalism, but if you're the average schmuck on the street who's trying to take a photo of a scene, and this can help you out, and it's not, and like the guy was testing, it looks like it is not just saying, oh, that looks like a moon, therefore I'm going to superimpose an image on the moon over what's there and try to match it up. And it is still the photo you're taking. And, this may go against a purist or whoever or whenever they ever truly existed, but this doesn't really, doesn't really, as the gift go, grind my gears over this. This isn't as bad as certain camera companies saying, "Oh, we did this with our smartphone, and they actually took it with an SLR." That's different. But this is just someone using, computational photography to make the photos better. And if you can make someone's photos better without them having to go and, bust out something like Photoshop or something else and, take care of it that way, that's perfectly, in my mind, there's nothing really wrong with that.
So, in your opinion, you don't see it as no loss of integrity in the image.
Not really, no. I mean, it's similar to, like I've one person is a local photographer, Dave DeCillo, and occasionally he'll take photos or show kind of behind the scenes when he does his cityscapes. And you look at you look at the end product and you look at the amazing photo. And of course, his skill is amazing in terms of the photos he puts out. But then he shows you all the behind the scenes stuff. He's like, oh, this image I have of the moon in between the bridge here, this is actually a composite of multiple images. And I'm using this super zoom lens to get the aspect ratio and just the overall image right here. Where, no, it's not the average person who can just pick up a camera at Best Buy or buy one off Amazon and get a tripod and take a photo. So if it's a matter of, hey, you can get a better photo without having to do all this extra work, without all the compositing, and that we're going to let the computer handle behind the scenes. Again, partially it's what it's used for. If it's me, you, average person, seeing a scene, taking a photo, and it turns out nicer than it did, then you could get it based on the physics of we're talking a very small lens. We're talking a very thin lens. There's only so much light something that big can go in. So if you're just talking straight physics, no, you can't take that good of a photo given that. But with the computational, if you can make a photo better, and you're not saying, oh, I on my own with my 100% skill took this photo, and only I with my skill, that's different. But if it's, oh, hey, look at this cool photo I saw, or look at this, and it's especially like a Samsung, a phone camera, which is, the modern day point and shoot. I really don't have a huge major issue with it.
Yeah, it's like probably 95% of the smartphone photos that hit Instagram are all computational, because in order to not be so computational, you have to shoot raw. All right. I mean, that's the only way around this. And there's, like I say, there's maybe 5% of the people posting to Instagram with a smartphone are going to shoot raw. And it could even be a lesser number than that. But, I mean, I notice a difference when I shoot a raw and a JPEG together out of Halide. And this is pre-Apple Pro RAW days, because Apple Pro RAW and the JPEG, that they look, pretty close. But if I turned Apple Pro RAW off and just shot straight RAW and a JPEG alongside it, you're going to be able to see the difference. And often, there were times when I was doing that where the JPEG would be a much more usable picture than the RAW, because if there was a situation where the raw is going to give you what you got. It's not going to do anything to it. You're not going to get any adjustments for highlights and shadows. So if you were shooting, say, a sunset, and if I exposed for the sunset, for the sky, then the ground is really, really, really dark, almost black. The silhouette. The silhouette effect, you just can't escape it when you shoot raw in a situation like that. So even when you're doing, say, street photography on a bright sunny day, if you're shooting raw, you're going to get, a lot less dynamic range in the raw. Well, no, that's not right either. You're going to get, an image that's going to need to be worked on. Just like the old film days, you take a negative and you have to develop it, and you work the highlights and shadows, do the old Ansel Adams thing, and work on that to get a final output. Whereas with these smartphones and the computational stuff that they're doing, it's just amazing what they can do in such a short period of time, and it's almost instantaneous. You're getting highlights dealt with. You're getting shadows. You're getting segmentation. You're getting so many things are happening. And like Dave mentioned, purists, they're going to poo-poo that kind of image, because it's not what the sensor caught naturally. Matt, what do you think?
All right. I have so many thoughts about this. So I definitely agree with pretty much everything that Dave said earlier about this topic. So in terms of like the image coming out of the camera, to me, it feels a little bit like the computational stuff that the smartphone cameras and even, some of the other handhelds, DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, the stuff that they're doing now is really just like the next step beyond the kind of baked in camera profile type stuff that was always happening. Like when you shot JPEG, or if you turned the mode dial to, some sort of camera profile like vivid or sunset or portrait or something like that in your camera. It was always going to do something to your picture. But this like computational and AI type stuff goes further than that. And honestly, in my opinion, the way I see it, it really more started with like apps than it did the cameras, right? So the cameras were always doing the, tweaking things, saturation, sharpening contrast with like your JPEGs and stuff. But then you could, whether you shot RAW or whether you shot JPEG or whatever format, you could throw your photo into an app on your iPhone and really go crazy with it, like the one that to me really kind of brought this type of AI sort of stuff to the forefront was the app Facetune. And not to single them out or anything, but, nobody really looked like that. But, people liked, they liked that. They liked that their skin was smooth and even toned or they could make their face thinner or, whatever. And it was easy to do. And people would put that out there as their profile pictures and have that be their representation of themselves. And it wasn't real. And I don't think that anyone, there was probably some people that were like, I hate the way I look and I want to look like this Facetune. So, that's how I'm going to present myself to the world. But I think a majority of people that, use that type of stuff and maybe put it as their profile picture or something, just thought like, oh, hey, look at that. That's kind of fun. I look, pretty good in this, no harm, no foul. And now these things are just getting like more and more advanced with what they can do. You have, editing software, on the iPhone. I really could just speak to the iPhone, not Android. I don't know much about that, but the iPhone and on desktops and stuff, you got things like Luminar on the desktop. Their big thing right now is, all these AI enhancements that they can do, like basically replacing the sky, and it's like absolutely perfect. It doesn't matter how complicated the background of the image is with like trees or whatever, it can replace the sky like perfectly and make it look natural. And as far as the ethics of all this go, I really think it just comes down to like the intention behind the person sharing the picture. I think you both were kind of saying this to a degree.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything wrong with this computational and this AI stuff. And for the people that are purists, I would say the nice thing is that you don't have to use it. There's always going to be some element of it, but if even that bothers you shoot film. And then even then, different films give you different effects. So what can you do?
Yeah.
But in any case, it's here to stay. There's really not much we can do about it. Really, it's just going to come down to, like I said, people's intentions. So, I tend to share photos that are, in quotes, true to life. So I don't do a lot of crazy manipulation, but occasionally I do. But when I do that type of stuff, I will call it out when I share it, whether that's on Instagram or Flickr or whatever. I have turned day pictures to night pictures, and I've added stars to skies or, whatever, and done stuff like that. But I call it out, and let people know like, hey, this isn't real. And I want people in those instances to just enjoy the picture for what it is, right? It's something that's not reality. And sometimes that's the point, is to escape reality. But I try to also make those images look like they could be real. But because I do that, I feel it's my responsibility to let people know that this is not reality, right? It might look like it could be, but it's not.
Yeah, and that's important because, I mean, if you were like, okay, let's go back to the news media or whatever. If a sports photographer is covering a hockey game and he digitally puts that puck from one place in the frame to another, and if he gets caught, his reputation is down the toilet and his career is probably going to be over. So there's a lot of integrity, a lot of integrity involved in that. And for us, just as enthusiasts, like Marc, he's a wedding photographer. That's a different thing. But when he does his iPhone stuff and we do our iPhone stuff, we don't necessarily have that big of a reputation to uphold. But being honest about it is definitely the best way to go. Like, sure, you can throw an image together with a number of apps and throw it on Instagram and not say a word about it. But personally, I kind of don't like that idea. I would, my calling myself out is with hashtags. If I use something like, forget what the app's called, Reflect, I think, or Reflection, or, if I'm reflecting water, I'll hashtag that in the post, and probably should maybe type in there that I've added this reflection with an app or whatever. But, I generally like to just caption my photos with a title and then put all my, hashtag what I've basically done with it in one way or another.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that either. I mean, if you don't call it out, and let's just say you have some artsy title for your picture and somewhere down the road, somebody comments on it and asks you like, hey, that's a cool reflection. Is that real? Yeah, then it's your job to be honest about it.
Exactly. And people have caught me because I have a general set of hashtags that I put in, and I think I forgot to take one of the hashtags out, and somebody called me out on it, and I said yep, my bad, and then I fixed the post, but I try to keep it 100% authentic right from the beginning. So
people actually call you out on it.
Yeah, it was
maybe that reflection stuff. What is the reflection of the? It looks like there's water beneath the photo or something.
Well, that wasn't the one that I got called out on. The one I got called out on was a long exposure shot I did with Spectre, and I forgot to put the Spectre hashtag in, but I did have the Helllight hashtag in.
For Christ.
And somebody said you can't do a long exposure with Helllight. What did you do? Or whatever it was. So I boom, smacked myself in the head and fixed it.
I bet that guy was, I got him.
Yeah, probably.
Truth is
I think his name was fact. I think his name might have been Marc Sadowski. No, I'm just kidding.
What a dick.
So, okay, Marc, what do you got to say? Let's okay. You were a journalist.
So I could share a few stories towards the end of the podcast about some of my early learnings of photojournalism, because it's quite contradictory and quite funny. But to this point, all of us use iPhones. So iPhone is in no way trying to manipulate what's in the photo. It's just trying to bring forth what our eyes are already seeing. And they're just trying to essentially fight physics, because it's a small camera, small sensor, and the depth of field and everything. There's only so much that the laws of physics can do optically. So they have to make up for it using AI learning and digital computation. They basically have to use that to compensate, and in that respect, I think in overall, I think it's fine, as long as the journalist is not then doing any kind of manipulation afterward. Then I think everything is fine. In fact, I do know that a lot of photographers, or I can't actually speak to the amount of photographers, but I know that during the Capitol riots, there were photographers that had to hide their regular cameras and pull out their phones to continue doing their work, because their regular cameras basically painted them, with a target. They were now, they in order to continue, they had to kind of blend in, and so the iPhone became essential to their job. And I don't know if they used any kind of apps. I know some people just continued with video, but no, I don't think any news outlet was condemning them for switching to something that uses computational photography. I think it was fine as is, and that is the case nowadays when you're photographing. I know Fujifilm, you have the film simulations, which is very fancy computational photography. Mm-hmm. You're basically, I mean, granted, you're it's mimicking the old film stocks from the past, but it's essentially the same thing. You're basically using a certain set of tone processing to make very specific kind of colors in the end. I mean, if you think about it this way, every photo that we take with a digital camera is computational photography, because it is, every processor is going to interpret what's coming off the sensor differently. The important thing is that nothing is being manipulated at the end. So this particular photo of the moon, while the initial concern was that there was overlays happening, there's basically popping in of a photo on top of a photo. Is that what is happening here? And I think very easily, the answer is no. Is there any enhancements happening? Yeah, probably.
All kinds, yeah.
Yeah, and it's using, again, it's using samples from photos that the camera is already taking. And in fact, I think the what is it, 100 times zoom on this phone?
Yeah.
Is that digital or optical?
It's digital. Times? The best it could do optically is 10 times. It's in that video on the website, on the post that Raymond Wong wrote, and it really shows a nice breakdown of how the cameras are set in there. But yeah, the 100 times space zoom is digitally.
Hot damn, that's a lot of. I mean, once you go digital, I mean, everything is computational at that point.
But it's a 108 megapixel sensor too.
I mean, geez, wow, that 108 pixels on such a tiny thing.
Yeah, I would want to play around with the phone myself and try that out to really form an opinion on how it works, because anything that you're seeing online especially from Samsung, they're going to show probably the best they got. But they do show in this video, they show it zooming into a man standing beside a Jeep, way off in the distance. And it really brings it in close, but then it kind of gives you a graphic illustration of what it's doing. The parts of the image that are being enhanced, like the license plate, the outline of the guy standing there and all that stuff. It really shows you what it's doing. And it does a pretty decent job for a phone, right?
And again, God, 108 megapixel smartphone device. That is like some super.
Now that being said, those pixels are 0.5 nanometers, whereas the iPhone 12 Pro Max on the wide camera sensor, the new sensor it has, it's a bigger sensor now. Physically, still same number of pixels, 12 megapixels, but each pixel in an iPhone 12 Pro Max is 1.7 nanometers. So
right, but you still what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is there's still a lot of computational stuff that's happening. I mean, God, the amount of heat that it's trying to disperse. There's a lot there, and it's like wow. But yeah, in the end, it's still taking the same photograph. There's nothing being added. It's essentially being assembled, and you're still capturing the moment as it happens. So I think ethically everything is fine.
Let me ask you guys this. So, we all shoot and we all edit. Do any of you feel like any of this computational AI stuff has made the editing process easier for you? Because for instance, what's that?
For my own photography, I would say it's. I don't think it changed anything. In fact, I think it's allowed me to use Apple's editing suite a little bit more than I would say like my quick go-to is Snapseed, because that's the one that I've been using the most often. And if I need to do anything a little bit more hardcore, it's going into things like Photoshop. But Apple's native editing is actually pretty decent, and I've gotten a new appreciation for that when editing the Apple RAW.
Yeah,
so I know for me.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that was. Oh, go. Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead. I'll shut up. I'll mute.
You're fine. I know for me, actually, kind of similar to Mark, like kind of my more snapshot type pictures, I'm pretty happy to just hit like auto in the Photos app, edit and then hit auto and call it good, because the photos look pretty darn good to begin with. But when it comes to like, I don't know, my landscape pictures that maybe I'm a little bit more serious about, I don't think it's really changed a whole lot. It still feels like I'm doing the same amount of editing. I'm just tweaking different sliders than I used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I was really big on LumaBee, and I still really like it a lot, but it doesn't see Apple Pro RAW, and it's a little it has a hard time keeping up. When I move a slider on my 12 Pro Max, it has a hard time keeping up to the movement. Like I have to move it and then let it catch up. I'm not sure what's going on there, but Photos, like the Photos app, the editing suite, like you said, Mark, it's pretty darn good. When I shoot Apple Pro RAW, I generally do the processing right there in Photos. If not Photos, then either RAW. Okay, so my order would be Photos, RAW Power, or Darkroom, and it kind of depends on the image and what I want to do with it. Because in RAW Power and Darkroom, I do like there's one part where you can play with the saturation and luminance and whatnot of a single color. There's like 6 different choices. So if I want to, doctor up a sunset, and if I want to brighten the orange, I can just isolate the orange and do that. Whereas with Photos, you can't do it. You can on the Mac, but not on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at too. It's like, if I need to do stuff a little bit more in depth and the Apple editing just, isn't quite doing it for me, that's where I would jump into, the programs that I prefer to use, like Polar, for instance. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're kind of all on the same page here with this.
Yeah. What about you, Dave? Like, you've been using Polar a little more lately. Have you found that, any of the AI stuff that's built into Polar is helping you or changed the way you do your edits?
Yeah. Actually, I found a couple of the photos, and I posted it to the Tiny Shutter group of a selfie I did. And just because it was incredibly backlit, and with the snow in the background, kind of giving additional light from behind, that I was able to use its face recognition built-in Polar and just basically boost things. Because when I've done it in the past with Apple's built-in, trying to fix the lighting and not me being 100% shadow, my face always turned like red. Just trying to boost things up, but I was able to handle my face separately, and it actually using its built-in, that's a face. So using its facial recognition.
Yeah, it turned out really well, because I looked at those images and you can really see the difference between the original. I think it was the original you posted and then the one that you did over in Polar, and it was quite the difference.
So, yeah, I mean, and the fact that I was able to, and also its recognition of different parts of the scene. So I could say, okay, the background's the background's overblown again because it was a snowy background. But I mean, it said, this is the background, and it automatically, and it did a pretty good job saying this is background. So I was able to deal with that separately from my face versus the thing I was holding, and get everything to be a lot better balanced on top of that. So, and that was with the front-facing camera on my 10. So, the fact that it's a few-year-old camera with the front-facing versus what can be done now, like I said, I think where this article and this idea maybe got a little more heat, if you will, is the thought of, what Samsung's really doing is that isn't really your photo. They know it's the moon. They're replacing it with the stock photo of the moon. That makes everything look so much better. And it's like, okay. Yeah, I mean, the fact that they're able to get these kind of images is pretty impressive with the smartphone. But and honestly, to think about, because I've never, since I never developed my own film, I was never, hands-on like that. But even the quote unquote purist, even if you develop your own film, everyone would have their own developing skills, technique, where your photo will not look like my photo, even if we shot with the same equipment, with the same film, and then went to develop it, would be different. Same thing with the AI. The only thing is that we have to realize that, we're giving up, if we ever really had it. For most people, they never had it, never had the skill, never had the desire, never had the equipment to actually do all the manual editing. After all, sit someone in front of Photoshop and say, go for it, and see them weep in a few minutes, including myself. So you're saying the camera is now taking over some manual skill. I hate to say it, but that's kind of human history. The machine's taking over some human manual skill. I can appreciate the human manual skill, but still say it's not a bad thing for the majority of people that this is available out there. And like I said, I still expect maybe this year, maybe next year, Apple will probably come out with something similar.
No, I got to disagree.
Okay.
What essentially what the iPhones or whatever smartphone device you have is essentially turning it into what is previously a point and shoot camera, where you take the photo and photo is done. This is not replacing the skill you need to actually compose the photo. So in cases of photojournalism, I mean, back in my day, every reporter had to carry around a cheapo point and shoot camera because you didn't know whether the regular photographer was going to be there in time. So you wanted something was better than nothing. And we all needed to know how to take the photo and what the best way to do that was and so forth. So that can't be replaced. That can't be simulated. And as you know, from our own experiences, not our own experiences, but look what happened fairly recently. God, I don't know how far this is going back, but when the Chicago Sun-Times or one of those newspapers basically laid off their photography staff. Yeah. And during the Stanley Cup playoffs, what a difference one newspaper had compared to the other. And it was, granted, the people who took the photos with the iPhones and everything did a decent job. It wasn't, compared to what the other stuff is. Composition is everything, no matter what device you're using. And I needed to emphasize that. No.
And I should have been more exact in what I was saying, because you're absolutely right. That it's just the skill, the artistry part is still there. I meant more of kind of, well, let me, an analogy, and let me see if this makes more sense. Let's say I'm building something, like some steps or something. And let's say my brother-in-law, who's a roofer, is building steps. And we have the same tools. Now, to be honest, it's a lot more skill for, let's say, using hand tools, which would be the kind of the equivalent of doing a lot of the photography manually, versus power tools. Because I don't have the manual skill and ability that he does to do what he needs to do per se. But where the kind of the artistry, where it comes to what you were talking about taking photos and the vision of taking the photo, not the mechanics, but the vision, is saying, oh, this is what I have in mind. This is how I'm going to build it, where I don't have that, and he would. Same thing with photography. Even if the equipment was the same, if someone does not have the knowledge, the skill, the background in terms of taking a photo, their photo still won't be as good. And then you give them equipment which isn't as good. It looks kind of plain. It looks just, like you gave an average person off the street a smartphone and said, here, take a picture, when you're going to put that in a like I said, when they put it on in the newspaper, where it's not just the fact that they're using a smartphone versus that, but also it's partially, I think, that way, someone doing 5 things at once instead of someone focusing on one thing exclusively there too. So yeah, you're right. I mean, if I sounded like I was overblowing, saying, well, the camera can take over, and a photographer, you can replace an expert photographer with software and hardware. No. And if I came across that way, I didn't mean to. That is not what I meant to say. I'm just that it can get, by removing a lot of the manual parts that maybe that can be taken away, it can make the average person's photo better, and that's a good thing. I don't know if I muttered the watered or.
No, I kind of see what you're saying. I mean, it's basically helping people with their photos, the computational stuff. No, I get that. It's making it more true to life rather than it's better than somebody taking a raw photo for the first time and wondering why it's so bad.
Yeah. And I mean,
I don't get it. Raw is supposed to be better.
And that was me. That's why I don't shoot in raw. But in terms of when you guys were talking also about the camera and not just correcting things, I've done that with photos. But like Greg said, I also, like if I use the Photoshop camera app to, let's say, replace the sky, which I think it does a great job at, where, hey, I don't want to have a gray, plain background sky because that's generally what I have to deal with if I have to take a picture of a sky. And I want to have clouds or I want to have sun in there. It does a great job of replacing it, but I don't specifically say sky replaced by Photoshop camera app, but I do use the hashtag PS camera. And sometimes, especially with like the Facebook group, I'll put in saying, okay, here's what I took right out of the camera, and here's what it looks like after the editing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I do want to add to all of this is, which I think is, I'm going to rip this thing apart, and we our community is very quick to jump on photojournalism, topics. What no one is doing is jumping on the photojournalism writing aspect of these things. And this is such a poorly written article. Is it thorough? Sure. He leads you through down some breadcrumb trails, but in all honesty, it's a article that builds up something and leads you to nowhere. I'm from my point of view, if I were to play detective here, is he saw that the computational photography was doing something to the photo. He smelled something fishy. He made that conclusion prior to the writing. He wanted the outcome to be one thing, but found it to be something else, and so he had to make something to basically get the clicks, get that reaction, that I gotcha, but really nothing happened in this. It is just a complete waste of time. The article is just bad. There's a reason why newspaper articles are written the way they are written. Who, what, when, where, why, all in the first 2 paragraphs. You get your entire gist of the story within that area, and then everything else is based on that core concept in those opening lines. and it's a lost art that doesn't happen much. Everything is very, just haphazard, and you see it in camera reviews all over the place. It's saying, "Stay true." You got to get to the end to figure out if this is good or not. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not how everything works, or should. I'm just tired of the piss poor articles that do not use any kind of journalism. It's not that hard to take a quick class and kind of get the gist of it, but I just think the article is a whole lot of nothing to get people riled up. But that's just my take.
Matt, so you're saying thoughts? Everyone should go read it as soon as possible?
Sure.
Any final thoughts, Matt?
Well, yeah, actually, I will leave you guys with one thing, which is my roundabout way of saying that you should just kind of do whatever you want. But there's a photographer named Gregory Heisler. He's an editorial and commercial portrait photographer. He's been doing this thing since the 1970s, so about 50 years now. Shot lots of magazine covers and major ad campaigns for all kinds of top brands. But in any case, he's got a quote that I think kind of sums this up, really. He says, regarding photography, if your only expectation is the satisfaction of making the picture, it will never let you down.
That's interesting.
I don't know. He's never seen some of my photos. There's plenty to get let down.
Well, no. But he's not talking about the outcome. He's talking about the satisfaction of making the picture. Because I agree with this 100%. When I am out shooting, I am very satisfied, very happy. I'm not let down by the experience in any way. Sure, when I get home and I look at the pictures, I'm massively let down all the time. But actually going out and doing it, very satisfying.
Yeah, I would echo that. Because there's times when if I haven't been out taking pictures for a while, I just feel like I want to get out and I want to make a photograph. And when I'm out there, I just feel this sense of satisfaction and relief that I was able to get out and do something that I really enjoy doing. And, but there's quite a lot. I get home and I'm a little disappointed with what I'm looking at, but the satisfaction of getting out there and creating, that's what does it.
And that's kind of just a kind of I'm going to toot Fujifilm's horn here for a minute. That's part of the reason why the Fujifilm X Pro 3 was designed the way it was designed, because it has a LCD on the back, but you have to actively flip down the screen to access your LCD. Otherwise, there is no LCD on the back. And it is made for you to be in the moment, to take your photos. And there are a lot of people that will gripe about that camera, but once they get to see and feel how it changes them when they start photographing, they start singing a different tune. So, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
All hail Fuji.
Yeah. Dave, any final thoughts real quick?
Not really. I mean, I think we nicely covered it, and I'm agreeing with Marc. It was like the way the article almost reads is it was almost like and I'm gonna, there's nothing to get got here.
Yeah.
I have an article I need to put out. But But I mean, like I said, at least it opens discussion about other things, if not the camera here, just in general.
Yeah. Well, kind of maybe this is taken, defending Raymond Wong a little bit. He did do what he set out to do with that article in it, and that was reveal the truth behind what the camera's doing. Was it faking or was it not? And he revealed that it was not. And that's all I'll say about it. I'll leave it at that. But
he didn't reveal anything. It's basically the same stuff that everybody's been saying from the start. I mean, it's basically the spec sheets.
What it wasn't doing is it wasn't overlaying a texture in the image, like with another, like a preset image of the moon over top of the existing shot of the moon. That's what it wasn't doing, and that's what he proved.
It's not adding cows to the photo either.
No, he was. It was just enhancing the image. That's all it was doing.
Yeah, but no one was arguing.
But the people, there were people on Twitter accusing Samsung of having an overlay built into the phone, which there isn't. That's what he was defending.
That's what he was. Drinks the blood of the dead.
That's what he set out to prove one way or the other. So my final thoughts on this whole thing is basically, and like I said earlier, if you're going to, the purpose of the image will dictate basically how you go about it. So if you're a press photographer and you need to show, or better yet, let's just say you're a forensic photographer, you have to shoot raw. No two ways about it. That's it. You have to shoot raw. You cannot shoot. If you can't shoot raw, then you got to shoot film, because you cannot show anything that's not true. Now, on the other side of it, for the 95 point however many people who are posting to Instagram or whatever, it's pretty much been socially accepted now that computational photography is fine. And it's ethically fine, because that's the way these things work. And if you want to use them, you gotta accept that. And I'm going to say, I bet you 90% of those 95% of people don't care and maybe don't even know how much computational stuff is going on. You almost have to be a photography enthusiast or maybe an Apple enthusiast when you're talking about the iPhone to know how much computational stuff's going on. Like, I work with guys who, two of them have an iPhone, and neither one of them could care less about how it works. They just want to do what they want to do with it. So, I think it's, as far as ethics in computational photography goes, I think it's fine. I think it's it is what it is. You can't escape it unless, like I say, you're going to shoot raw or film. That's pretty much it.
So I've been too far removed from journalism to know the quote unquote rules of engagement when it comes to like the proper photo, what you can and what you can't do.
Well, yeah, because so much has changed in the cameras and stuff since you studied that, right?
I mean, yeah, and again, I mean, everything I've done has been local news, never anything on the national scene or anything like that. And again, I have a few stories that I could share maybe later down the road. But like, as far as the official word on computational photography, I can't know for certain what their official stance is. But I mean, from my point of view, I know that it must be okay to some extent because it has been used in photo. The iPhone has been used in photojournalism. If that's the only camera that you have, then that's then you're using it, and so it must be okay to at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I think it's becoming a socially acceptable thing, even to the extent of the media. Like to some extent in the media, I guess is a better way to put it. Well, that was a really good, good engaging, well done conversation, I think, guys, about a subject that, maybe not everybody's interested in it, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed once in a while because, there's a lot of street photography that goes on. There's like you just alluded to, Mark, is these devices are now being used by the media and the press, and it's kind of nice to have an idea of what is involved in that, especially when it comes to the ethics. So, I want to thank you guys for coming on, Mark and Matt. Thanks for your input, and Dave, for your input as well. It was all fantastic from everybody, and I think we kind of beat this one to the ground. I think. I mean, we could talk this stuff for hours, I know, but who would want to listen to us? So, Mark, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
You could find me on Instagram or Twitter. I'm Marc Sadowski. That's Mark with a C. And I am also on the Tiny Shutter YouTube channel. If you do a search for Tiny Shutter, you'll find me. And of course, there's the Tiny Shutter podcast that is going through still its changes, but it is coming around. I don't know what's happening there, but stay tuned. Subscribe.
Well, tell everybody who you talked to recently on Tiny Shutter.
Jesus? No. Okay. I plead nowadays. No, Ben Sadowski from so I never say his name right, but from Halide. He is the most recent conversational piece in that he helped in talking about the computational photography that goes behind the long exposure on the iPhone and why the apps do what they need to do. So head on over to Tiny Shutter to check that out.
Yeah, I listened to that, and it was a really, really good conversation. And I think maybe I enjoyed it so much because I'm a geek, because it got pretty geeky, which was good. And let's not forget your other podcasts that you do.
Oh, Fuji Love. Yes. Yeah. I do the Fuji Love podcast for Fuji Love magazine. For the latest and greatest in all things Fujifilm X series and GFX, head on over to fujilove.com.
Right on. Matt, where can we find you?
All right. I'm still in all the same places, but mostly if you want to see anything that I'm doing or sharing, I would say just go to Instagram. I'm at M Hoffman Photo.
Dave, how about you?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as ProfPod. Twitter's still on the yelly side, but photography, and it is metal munching. It's the beginning of metal munching season, so you'll a few more pics of metal munching on the both Twitter and Instagram there.
Yeah, the latest one was pretty cool too.
Yeah,
it was like a gorilla or something.
It was supposed to be a Yeti.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. For a frigid 5-miler race that originally supposed to be in January, but they were able to pull it off last weekend. Just in time for Valentine's Day, the day before Valentine's Day. Go out and have him run in mid 20-degree weather.
Oh, yeah, he should have a medal just for being out in that weather. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Macmillan Photo, on Twitter, Macmillan_photo, and even on Flickr, just with my name, Greg McMillan, all one word. And, this show stemmed from the Artful Iphonography community, which is now hosted on MeWe, and we're still getting more people signed up. We're getting close to 80 members now, and that is at artfulipc.club. And you can find this podcast on the website, iphonography.ca. And we do this show every 2 weeks, as long as we can. And you can get it on the Apple Podcasts app, iHeartRadio, probably just about any place where you can get a podcast. It should show up, hopefully. If not, do a search for iPhonography in your podcast player of choice, and hopefully it'll show up. And thanks again, guys. It's been a great conversation, and we will see everyone on the next one.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.